of you here tonight. Last week we had so many people who weren't able to come on Sunday morning that we almost ran out of the juice. Bread's one thing you can dump a bunch in there, but the juice was pretty specific, and it's kind of interesting how we had exactly the right amount. I'm kind of excited about our study tonight on being self-control, because this is the key to being a good Christian. What you have to fight over and over and over and over again is to be someone who is in control of your heart and your mind and your soul. And so what we're going to talk about first is the goal. Let's take a look at Hebrews 10, verse 22. Hebrews 10, verse 22. Let's see what it is. Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart, in full assurance of faith, having one heart, sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water. So let's see what he's saying here. Here's the goal. The goal is for us to have a sincere heart. And this is not easy. First of all, we have to figure out, well, what in the world is a sincere heart? What are you saying? How are we to accomplish this? Because, we hear this, we sing songs about it, but how is it that we accomplish that? Let's talk about sincerity and earnestness and being indifferent. Let's take a look here. Earnestness, showing deep sincerity and efforts in the work of the church. Indifference, it is neither good or bad, but the state of our society. Next one, show an earnest gesture of goodwill to all men. It does not matter one way or the other or another about the Lord. Determined, eager, zealous, and earnest in the attempt to lead souls to Christ. I have neither interest or concern about the church. See the worship of God as an important and vital nature of man, not trivial or petty. There's neither right nor wrong in worshiping God. Serve God with a serious and purposeful intent to obey His word. I have neither active nor inactive qualities in attendance each Lord's day. So we can see this earnestness or this desire, this sincerity in having a heart towards God. We can see how we're desirous to worship God. We're desirous to come and be serious about what God has commanded us to do. And it all stems from the fact that we know that God has created us, and He created us with one purpose, and that is for us to love and be His children. And then whatever you do, your interest may be totally different from mine. Because we could just look around the room here and see all the different people and all the different things that they're interested in doing, where they go find jobs, or the kind of jobs that they have, or whatever they have developed for themselves, and it's different than for other people. And so we see that that's not the will of God, while God does expect us to pay our own way, because what He say, if a man will not work, he will not eat. So He also told Adam, from now on you're going to eat by the sweat of your brow. So some people even said that was wrong for God to say about that, because working is a pleasure, it's something that's great, but the reality is working is always doing something you would just as soon rather stay home from. Simple as that. And while it may be something you're interested in, unless you're building your own business, you're not really fired up about getting up and doing it. And so we have to have this earnestness about us, about God and His works. Are we concerned about the people who are not in the church, people who are in the church and need to be helped along because they're still babes in Christ, even though they may have been here for a long period of time? People don't understand and everything. In fact, we had a question this evening, whatever time it is, and they were talking about the new heaven and the new earth. How is it we can have a new heaven and a new earth? Well, very simply, now that we have become a Christian, the earth looks totally different. Now that we have become a Christian, we know we're going to be able to live in heaven with God. And heaven is not is where God is now, but so is Satan. Once the judgment comes, that separation comes, and God will be living without Satan and his evil forevermore. And so we know that heaven now looks different. Heaven and earth look different. We know the earth is going to be done away, so we don't have to worry about that. So we have to understand and make sure we keep everything in context of what God has told us. And two, then we see that we are to have full assurance of who you are. You have to be a person who is capable of knowing who you are so that you will act according to that purpose. So you have to have an assurance, or you have to have this confidence and this standard and integrity and all that. You have to have that in the fact that you are a saved person. This morning we talked about being saved, and most people don't even know what they're saved from. But Paul tells us over in Romans 1 that we are saved from the wrath of God against those who are wicked. And see, we're not wicked anymore. Once we've been baptized, we're washed clean. Our has nothing to do with the water, except that was the command. And it's from the fact that we're immersed into the water, we're separated from the sins of the world, done exactly what God said. And then because our sins are removed, God then can live within us in the form of the Holy Spirit. And so it's great. Or we say yes, or you say from the wrath of God against wickedness. Because our wickedness is gone. He tells us it's as far as the east is from the west. And you can't ever get any further than that. It's like throwing it in the sea, he says. It's just gone. Simple as that. And then notice too that our confidence comes from God, not from ourselves. Well, how do we have confidence from God? How does He provide us with confidence? Good question. Because sometimes I don't feel confident in what I'm doing or in how I'm able to do the acts that I'm doing. But the reason we're confidence comes from God is because we have confidence in God. Like we were talking about this morning, where when we pray, well, prayer works. Why does prayer work? Because it's God who has the power to change things. And when we pray to God, we're trusting in Him. We have confidence in Him that He will do what we ask Him to do. So you see the importance of this assurance, this full assurance, a sincere heart with a full assurance of who you are. Who are you? What name is on you? How do you think of yourself? Do you consider yourself to be a person of God? Are you doing godly works every day? Or are all the works you're doing of man? So, if you're not doing godly works, then what are you doing? And then you're wearing God's name. Wherever you go, whatever you say, whatever you do, you are an ambassador of heaven wearing God's name and knowing, having the full confidence and the full sincerity that you are a saved individual. We're the people of God. We're the ones that He calls His own. We're the ones that He says are part of His family. We're the ones that have an inheritance with Christ. And where is Christ? He's in heaven. So we know we have the same inheritance. You see how beautiful this is and how simple it is. We don't have to worry about getting confused, well, because God is not a God of confusion. He fully understands exactly what we need. We are the church that Christ built. We're the ones that He called out of the world, and we're the ones who came into the church through the door of baptism. We're the ones who have gone through the adoption process. We've died to ourselves, and we are now resurrected out of that water as Christians, as people of God. Knowing that, we have confidence in who we are and how we're to respond to this world and what it's doing. Now that's our goal. What's our goal? To have a sincere heart for God, to have assurance and confidence, and to know we're saved, and to wear God's name proudly, being careful where we go and what we do so that His name will not be tarnished. That's our goal, isn't it? Isn't that who we want to be? Isn't it the kind of Christian we want to see on this earth? Not people who come on Sunday and then on Monday they're back in the world again, doing worldly things and thinking worldly ways and all that sort of stuff. And let me tell you something. If you're going to go into business, it's hard to go into business with people who do not have the same ideology of God as you have. Because they can't understand why you're going to have integrity. They can't understand why you're going to cover costs that have happened because you're doing what is right for God. And they say, wait a minute, I'm not going to cover that. You have to think about these things. You have to think about what you did. And so you are, and don't forget, a child of God. This is stamped on you. Your name is written on His hand, and you wear the robe of righteousness that Christ paid for with His life. These are exciting times. These are hallmark times. These are privileged times for us. Speaking of hallmark, I'm not talking about the movies because they're going. They're pathetic. Okay, now what about the work? Let's take a look and see. Because, anytime you have a goal, it is worthless without the work. So we have to take a look at Romans. And Romans is going to tell us exactly what we need to do. Matter of fact, it's real simple and in one verse. Here we go. Romans chapter 12, verse 3. For by the grace given me, I say every one of you, do not think more highly. Think yourself more highly than you ought. But rather, think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. You know what that means? Your faith is going to grow, and so you're going to think differently in the future than you think now. But here's what he says: pay attention to why you're acting. He said, we're going to be Christians because of the grace given us. We're going to be Christians because of who God is. So you've got to think about how you're acting. How do you act when things go wrong? Do you run around and scream and throw your hands around and get mad and hit the wall? That's what most people do. Of course, you'll notice they never hit where the studs are. Yeah. They'll hit where the sheetrock is, but not the studs. How do you act when things go wrong? Who do you blame? You know, one of the greatest things I think that's ever happened to me is that my knee got hurt and my body went crazy. And I was thinking after that, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to preach and I'm going to do it whether or not I feel like it. And I was thinking, I could just hear God say, have you considered my servant GW? Let me tell you, when things go wrong, it may not necessarily be because of your own fault, but because God is there and proud of you. And so you can go through this pain, through these problems, and it may never be taken away. You may die with those problems. Paul did. He had a thorn in the flesh. I always thought it was knees. But he had a thorn in the flesh, and he had to do wherever that took. Of course, we kind of can think of it as his eyes because of the way he said, see, I signed this with my own hand. And it probably was huge. But we have no idea. But how do you act when things go wrong? Here's how you act. You act however you think. You act however you choose you are. Well, why do you do it? You do it because it's an outpouring of what's in your heart. How do you act to people when you see them in need? How do you act to people having trouble? Do you stop on the road when someone is hurt or they're walking in the rain and they're just bedrazzled? Do you take care you're concerned about others? Why do you do that? You do that because you have a heart that's a sincere heart for God. Why do you think, who do you think you are? Do you realize whose you are? And it should color everything you do. How you're fair to people, how you're looking ahead and seeing if there's someone in the line who is desperately in need. They're counting their money. They put things back because they can't afford it. Are you thinking about them? Are you concerned about others? Or are you always just concerned about yourself? Look, being self-controlled is hard work. But it is work that has a reward. What's the purpose of work anyway? Purpose of work is to get something done for the reward. That's why I hate dusting. There's no reward in it. It's going to be dust on it again tomorrow. Oh, man. I was, when my wife first came to me, I had to clean the house up real good. And she came, and so one day she's busy cleaning the house again, you know, like she always does. And I love her because, man, we have a nice clean floor, and it's just great. Anyway, she was cleaning, and she found a shelf that I had missed. It was about an inch deep in dust. And we had gone to see people. I'd taken her with me out to get furniture and stuff, and she'd see, this person has a collection of horses on their wall, and this person has a collection of pots and pans. You've seen those. I don't even think they use them. They're just a big collection on the wall. And this person has a collection of plates. This person has this and that. And she said, what do you collect? And I said, dust. I collect dust. I'm very good at it too. So what you want to do is you want to pay attention to why you act, how you think, who you are, and all of that. And he says, rid yourself of these evil motives. Rid yourself of problems, of things that aren't right, things that aren't going well. And here's what you ought to do. If you want to be able to correct yourself and you want to get better, journal it. Journal how you acted towards people today. Just write down a quick little note. And then think about, why did you act that way? Did you act that way and show that you were a person of God? Or did you act that way and show that God has really and truly nothing to do with how you think? One journaling is one way. And it doesn't take much, just a piece of paper. You don't have to have a whole book. You don't have to fill up the whole book. You just simply write down how you acted that day to certain people and why. Did they bother you? Is it when you looked at them, did you think they weren't worth it? Let me tell you something. We judge people very quickly, whether or not we think they're worth dealing with, whether or not we like them, whether or not we think we're above them or below them. And, we will see what we think about them, and then we'll act that way. So you have to think about how you're acting and how you're treating others and how you're visiting them. And so you have to examine yourself. Examine yourself to see if you are still in the faith. If your faith validates whether you're still in the truth of the Bible doctrine. Your faith is a belief in action. How are you acting? Is your faith validating what you say you believe in of God and who He is and how He will hold you responsible and how all these things will be examined? I shudder to think, and I'm very glad to know that I'm saved. But in Judgment Day, every single act you have ever done, be it good or evil, will be revealed. And I know we'll be just like Isaiah, who fell on his face and said, I'm undone, I'm undone. I can't imagine thinking, in other words, I'm not worthy of anything. Well, I can't speak your words. I can't be with you, God. I'm no value. Do you remember the story of the angel, of the being from God took a coal and seared his mouth so that his mouth was made pure again and he could speak the words of God? It's powerful stuff to think about. Take those stories of the Bible and apply them to you. You're no different than Abraham or Moses or Jesus Christ. You're a human being. And you're going to go through the same emotions, up and down, desires, needs, and everything as they did. How do you handle it? Are you handling it according to the faith? That's the way you want to handle it. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. Why? How come we can't do that, God? Because that's not who you are. You're not evil, you're good. You're not someone who insults others. You're someone who builds others up. Your job is not to go around correcting people. If you do this, you'd be better. And your job is to go around building people up and showing them the way of God. How in the world are you going to show them God when you're being rude? Simple as that. And it doesn't matter who the person is. They may be the crudest person you've ever seen. And when they come in your house is filthier because of it. I remember one time we went to this lady's house, and boy, was it filthy. And she had about 2 or 3 kids, and they were all dirty. And she said, would you like a drink? and I'm looking at the dishes in the sink, and I'm looking at how dirty everything is, and the tables and all that sort of stuff. I thought, yeah, do I? and the verse came to mind where it says, when you go into a house, eat whatever they put before you. And I said, thank you. And she brought me a glass, unfortunately, a clean glass of water, clean water. But you never know. Went to one lady's house one time, and I don't like raw onions. I don't like it all. I like cooked onions, and I prefer without onions. But everything she fixed had raw onions on it. She must have been back there cutting up onions forever. And she'd sprinkle them on the green beans, she'd sprinkle them in the ham, she'd sprinkle them in everything. And finally, at the end, she said, oh, we have ice cream. I said, really? Is it homemade? She said, no, it's Bluebell. I said, okay, I'm for it, because I knew it wouldn't have onions in it. But you can't repay evil with evil because it's not who you are. You're a good person. You know who ate all that stuff? Those onions? Me. Why? Because I was a godly person. That's what I have to do. I come over to your house and you have rhubarb, rhubarb or turnips and rutabaga, and I'll be there, I'll eat, and you won't know, but I won't like it. Look, you don't have to like, but you have to do for them, because it is for them you're living. I'm not who I am underneath. It's not who I am underneath. It's what I do that defines me. Never thought Batman would be telling you something about God, does it? But he's saying that he's going to go out and do what is right because he wears a costume and he's Batman. Here's the question. Do you wear the righteousness of Christ? And do you do what is right to do before God? Is it who you are? Or is it who, it's not your body, it's not your health, it's not your, any of that stuff. It is who you are in the heart. And he says, be kind. Be kind. What a simple little, oh, isn't that cute? Be kind. Yeah, be kind. Let me tell you, that's hard to do. It's hard to be kind to certain people. But you know what that means? Be kind, in other words, after the kind that your Father is. Because we're not worldly people. We're people of God. We're going to be of His kind. Who sends the rain on the good and the unjust. He's the one that cares about people, whether they care about Him or not. They're all out there not caring at all. He still gives them quality air. Their hearts are still beating. All that sort of stuff. Because He wants them to come and know Him. So, and use sober judgment by faith. His word sober means that you're going to have great clarity. Because you're going to look at it from the Scriptures. He instructs believers to have sober assessments of themselves, not thinking of themselves more highly than they ought, but rather to think of themselves with this sober judgment in accordance to the measure of faith God has assigned. So you have to think of yourself differently. And when you think of yourself differently, you will act different. Oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't like that person. And if you've ever been in a situation where you wanted to talk to somebody and they didn't want to talk to you. You know how that feels. And we can't afford to abuse our position with God when we're to be children of God. We are His hands and voice here on earth. We're the ones who are acting on His behalf so that mankind will come to know God by the glory of our actions. And you may think that what you're doing is not so glorious. You know, when you come over and some person has been interned for a while and they can't mow their yard, and you go there and you mow their yard, and you're all hot and sweaty, and you're trimming their hedges, and you're packing all that stuff in your car to take home to throw away at the dump or something like that. You're trying to help them in every way you can. That doesn't feel glorious, does it? But what you're doing is right before God. And so then we see we've got the goal, we've got the hard work, and now let's talk about the results. Over to Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 4. Listen to what he says. Here's the results. Verse 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only at your own interests, but at the interests of others. What are you talking about there? So you're no longer acting out of selfish ambitions. It's not about you. None of this is about you. This is about God and what He has done for you. And so when you act towards others, it has to be that you can't have selfish motives. Now, what are selfish motives? Let's take a look. James goes into this. He says the motive of selfish pleasure is the destructive power of words. Have you ever been put down by words? Think about how powerful they are. The conflict out of our selfish motives, arrogance rather than humility, false wisdom versus true wisdom, demonstrates genuine faith and its fruit of selfishness and its fruit. So you're going to act according to how you think. And when you say something, is it going to cut them? Now there's times for that. There's times when you have to say, hey fella, look at here. You've already read and we've already studied for a long time. You know good and well what you're supposed to do. Why aren't you doing it? We were out, I had bought a triple wide for $5,000, hadn't moved over onto some property. And the movers destroyed the third piece. Wasn't very big, but it was a piece. So every day I'd go out there and work on it, and I'd take it apart, and I'd save all the wood, take all the nails out and all that sort of stuff. And this guy come along, and he was going to church with us and everything, and he said, you know, GW, I just don't understand, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? And I said, you're looking at it all wrong, Harley. You're saying, why do we have to, when God said this is the way? Simple as that. Here's the way, like a street sign. Here's the road. Well, why do I have to turn now? I was going so good. Well, you're never going to find wherever it is you're going. And over this work that we were doing there, without me pestering him, he kept asking questions, and we baptized him that day. Let me tell you something. You need to work the work of God no matter what you're doing. And show people God through your words and your actions. Almost every sinful act committed can be traced back to a selfish motive. Did you hear that? I want this, I want that. It is a trace we hate in other people, but justify in ourselves. Isn't that fascinating? I love that saying. We hate it in other people, and we'll call it out on them, but we don't call it out on ourselves. So, remember, we have to work on ourselves. We have to see, why did we act the way we did? Why did we say what we said? Why did we respond the way we did? Why did we jump down their throats? And also, who are you blaming? Are you blaming God? Or are you blaming Satan? Let me tell you, a lot of things people blame God for. It's Satan's fault. You want to know why you lost a home in a tornado? There's a story, a joke over in Texas, Oklahoma area, and they said, how's a divorce like a tornado? Well, somebody losing a house, But you want to gripe about a tornado or floods or something like that? You can blame Satan because he made the world so sinful God had to change it. Before that was a greenhouse. There wasn't any storms, wasn't any rain, wasn't any tornadoes. And when God changed, he made it where we couldn't live to be over 100 years old because you couldn't raise and eat a whole brood of evil people. Let me tell you something, you can go in other places around the world and you can find a whole brood of evil people. And you don't want to be there. We are so fortunate to have been born here in these United States under people who have set up our Constitution to follow God and be concerned about what is right and what is wrong. You remember the saying happened years and years ago? I remember when I was a little kid, I'd go to the watch a movie, and you pay a quarter, and you get a Coke for a dime, you have a cup fall down the ice going, wow, look at that. And it fall crooked and you lost your money. But anyway, and then you go through the curtains and you go out and sit in the auditorium and you watch like a couple of cartoons and then the movie starts and you're all excited about it. Truth, justice, and the American way. You don't hear that anymore, do you? You know why? Because we don't have truth today in America, and we don't have justice. Also, he says, be humble. Change your attitude. Work hard on your own attitude. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less than you think of others. It's not about saying, oh, I'm not worthy, excuse me, I'm a poor Christian. No. It's thinking properly about yourself and holding other people as important. And then look to your interest and of others' interest. And you say, well, I can see that with this picture here, helping somebody else up. You know, I got up there first, and I can pull them up. And I understand that. But can you give me a better definition to look to your interests and then of others' interests? Well, let's talk about Christ. What did he do? He looked to his interests first. What were his interests? To remain sinless. If he hadn't done that, he couldn't have given the interests of other people. of the sacrifice of dying for us. So you see the example. You see exactly what he's talking about here. You see how important this is for us. We're to be people who are self-controlled and alert, because the enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. That is one nasty looking lion. And he's already found someone to devour. See that on his teeth. So be careful. Be in control of yourself. It's the cost of being perfect. To be perfect before God, you have to fight yourself. When you didn't, and when you're successful, guess who you are? You're self-controlled. Exactly what we're talking about. If you're not right with God, now's the time. If you want to study more, now's the time. If you want to figure out something, you know you're doing something wrong, you want to talk about it, let's figure it out together. Whatever you need, you can come forward as we stand and sing this song together.